Civil War was a good movie. So when I first heard about Civil War and saw the trailer for it, it did not look very good. It looked and sounded like a very boring generic war film that would not work in the slightest and would only function to push a generic message that wars are not good and that the government is bad or whatever. But turns out this movie has absolutely nothing to do with the Civil War, and it has to do with something completely different. And that completely different thing was actually really, really good, not gonna lie. Alright, so yeah, that out of the way, this review will have spoilers, so maybe skip this one if you want to go into the film blind or spoiler free. Okay, so basically Civil War follows a local news team covering an unexplained civil war in the United States. The movie kind of functions as a really messed up road trip movie. They go from stop to stop and attempt to take pictures of the war and dead people and all that stuff. So basically what you see in the trailers, yeah, that's not what the actual film is about. Almost none of this film is actually covering politics or the state the United States is in. It's more of a backdrop for these characters to kind of just vibe in. Honestly though, when I saw the trailers for Civil War, I thought it looked bad specifically for the Civil War aspects. I do think a film on a fictional or possible future Civil War could work, but personally I wouldn't like that concept very much, and the actual plot we were given is pretty good. The main idea here is war photography, and I actually really enjoy that idea. It kind of gives a new perspective to the people we follow during the movie. Instead of just attacking back against the enemy, the photographers just try to survive and snap good pictures no matter the consequence. You really have to detach yourself from the horrific stuff going on by being forced to follow these characters take pictures of their allies burning alive throughout the movie. If you dislike movies like that, then probably skip this. Still though, this idea gives room to some great battle sequences. This movie does this really cool thing where whenever a photo is taken, it'll quickly cut to the picture taken, which is either in black and white or in color. I really like this detail because it forces us to look at the horrific imagery for a split second before cutting right back to the battle. I just feel that it really captures what really matters during these battle scenes. Not the actual fight, but just getting good camera shots. Okay, so I have pretty mixed thoughts on the characters in this film. I'll just discuss them separately per character. So our main character Lee is pretty good. Hopefully I pronounced this correctly, but Kristen Dunst does a good job as her, even though she never really shows that much emotion. I think Lee was supposed to have a character arc throughout the movie, but I really feel like she never really grew. She kind of just acts the same throughout. The ending where she saves the kid character kind of comes out of nowhere, and I don't feel like she grew enough to actually do this, but the payoff of this moment is actually pretty interesting, and I will talk about it later. Another one of our leads is this kid who I can't remember the name of, who is played by Kaylee Spaney, I think, and she does a pretty good job as well. This is one of the only characters who showcases a lot of emotion throughout the film, and during those scenes she does a pretty good job. Her character also goes through an arc, but I like it a lot more than Lee. It's basically the opposite of Lee's journey. She starts off with a lot of care and compassion, and she ends the film much more emotionless. I will talk about this in detail later, but I prefer that arc a lot more than Lee's arc, and I think it's a very cool part of the film. So I think Lee and the kid are both pretty good, but I do think we start to run into issues once we get into Joe and Sammy. They both have much more minor roles than Lee and the kid, but they still have a lot of screen time. So I think one of the biggest issues with these two is the fact that they are both pretty uninteresting. They just don't have anything special about them. Like, I guess Joe is optimistic and Sammy's like old or something. I do think they both end up having pretty good moments later on. Joe has some funny parts and Sammy's death is pretty good too. However, at the same time, like, it's an effective moment, and it's pretty good seeing the characters' reactions to this, like Joe having mental breakdown and Lee taking a picture of his dead body. These are both pretty good moments, but Sammy actually dying has, like, no emotional impact on me at all. I really don't feel anything from it. His whole personality has just been the cautious old dude, so I didn't really feel anything about his death. Also, he's not really a character. He only has like 5 minutes of screen time. But I gotta talk about Tony. Who is this guy? Randomly in the film, he just shows up and jumps into their car, like literally shoves himself into their vehicle, and then proceeds to cause so many issues to them, like the epic Jesse Plemons moment. Sammy dies because of Tony showing up out of nowhere and jumping in their car. Tony literally shows up, causes problems, and then gets shot. Oh yeah, and Jesse Plemons was pretty good in this movie. He's pretty epic, except for the racism. Okay, as touched on before, this movie really just uses the Civil War as a backdrop for battle scenes. One of the main complaints I've heard about this movie is that it has no real point and that there's no real message and it's not trying to say anything deeper. I kinda agree on this. It's definitely not trying to say anything about America or the Civil War. Like, Texas and California uniting in this universe literally doesn't make any sense at all. But I don't really mind because I personally think this movie's main message was about losing your morality to become the best. It's not super focused on, but I feel like Lee throughout the film starts to slip and begins to regret her decisions, and that results in her dying later. I feel like the movie makes all the characters extremely emotionally repressed so that we, the audience, start to feel like the characters throughout the runtime. I personally like that message a lot. Just having the name Civil War as your title really is just clickbait for what the film is actually about. There's also the scene with Todd from Breaking Bad where he's racist, the Asians, which felt pretty on the nose to me. I couldn't really tell if he was racist for a deeper meaning or if it was just to cause conflict, but it was also a pretty bizarre choice that isn't really touched on again throughout the rest of the film. There's this one town that chooses to ignore the Civil War, but then they immediately leave the area. Like, seriously, this could have been a cool idea if they just fleshed it out more, but whatever, the main message this movie focuses on is still good, even if it's kind of muddled by the other kind of weaker executed messages. Speaking of messages, the ending is the strongest example of the morality theme I was talking about. Here's a hot take for you. I really like the ending. Everyone seems to hate it, but I genuinely thought it was the best part of the movie besides a few of the beautiful shots throughout. So as said before, Lee starts to gain more morals throughout the film, and in this final moment, the stupid kid does a stupid thing and decides to run right into the line of fire, and Lee tries to save her but gets shot in the process. Once she dies, the kid takes a picture of her dead body and is the one who is successfully able to take a picture of the president getting killed, which is where the film ends. I do really like this. Earlier in the film, Lee tells her that if the kid died, she would take a picture of her corpse, so this moment is kind of a callback to show that the kid has become just like Lee, which I really like. The one thing that bothers me during the ending is Joe, though. Like, when Sammy died, Joe had an actual mental breakdown and lost his mind. When Lee dies, he basically gives no reaction in the slightest. I guess you could say that he's also lost his morals, but he's just a silly guy throughout the film that doesn't really make sense at all for him to be like that. So yeah, him not caring is kind of bizarre to me. The ending is still great though. I think it represents the main point of the movie, and it's overall just very good. So yeah, in conclusion, I thought this was a pretty good movie. It has a lot of issues, and I do think it's a little messy here and there, but overall it's a really good looking film with really great performances, and in my opinion, a pretty good message and story. The Civil War aspects of the film really never matter, but I don't mind since I don't think I would actually like the Civil War part of the film. Overall, it's a solid 7 out of 10. Thanks for watching, and this is a epic outro.